So today we're going to be looking at a very simple method of drawing really accurately, which is using a graph or a grid to help you. And we're going to look at it in a very simplistic way. And we are going to start off with a photograph. In this case, I have a photograph of my granddaughter. And I am going to use a grid to enlarge this and turn it into a watercolor painting. For this video, I'm only going to be showing you the graphing part. So the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you have a nice high quality photograph to work with. Make sure it's big enough, make sure it's not pixelized, and then you're going to want to take a piece of tracing paper, place it over the photograph, and you are basically going to trace it to make it a line drawing. Now, you may or may not need a light table depending on the quality of the tracing paper that you get. So I'm going to go ahead and use this light table. And this is a pretty straightforward thing, so I'm not going to show too much of this. I will show it to you when it's done. So once you've taken and converted your photograph into a line drawing, you are now ready to place it on the graph and begin the next step. So I'm using a 1/2-inch graph, and I made this in Microsoft Word. Super easy to do with a table, but you can make it with a ruler or you can use some other program to do so. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and tape this in place. It's kind of important that you tape it in place, because once you start this next process, you do not want it to move around. Once you have your line drawing done and you get it onto a graph paper, the next step is to make your second graph. And you have to decide how big you want to go. So I'm going to put this aside for now. And they're actually very, very easy to make. You can even purchase these. But what you want to do is you want to make your scale to whatever size you want. So for example, if I want to double the size of this picture, I'm going to make them 1 inch wide. If I want to quadruple it, I'm going to go 2 inches wide. And all you have to do is you simply mark your paper 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch, all the way across. Repeat the same thing on the bottom and then connect them together. And then turn your paper 90 degrees and repeat the process. Okay, I've already done this one, so I'm just going to go ahead and flip it over so that it's ready to go. Now, the important part here is how you label this. You want to make sure that you label this bigger sheet exactly like the small one. So on the small one here, I'm going from A and I need to go to about L. And then this is blank, and then I'm going to go from 1 to about 13. Okay, and that's the way that I like to use coordinates. So I'm just going to go ahead and label this, and then we'll be able to get started. So we have our line drawing ready to go. We have it placed on a grid. We have a larger grip labeled exactly the same way as the smaller grid, and so now we are ready to begin. Now, as I'm doing this, I'm just going to go over a few little things. There's a lot of advantages of working with a graph. The two biggest ones is that a graph allows you to scale up or down to whatever size you want. In this case, I'm going from a 1/2 inch to a 1 inch, so I'm doubling the size. Okay. It helps you put everything, the placement, in the correct spots, and it really helps you with your proportions. However, a grid is not like the ultimate drawing. You still, as an artist, have to go back and render everything properly in order to make it look right. So now, how do we use the grid? It's super easy. What we're going to do, you can either go horizontally like this or vertically like this. It doesn't really matter. And you just want to take your time and start going one square at a time. So for example, if I want the top of the head right here, it's at FG1. So I'll go FG1 and I'm going to estimate how far is it from here to here, you know, the negative space right here. So I'm going to estimate that is right here. I'm not going to measure everything. Then I'm going to come over here to D, and I notice that this is like dead smack in the middle of D, right? D1. So I'm going to put that little mark right here. And then I can just kind of connect these together. Okay. Because it's the hair, it's not that critical that these lines are like perfectly perfect. Now when I get to other parts of the face, I'm gonna have to be a little bit more careful. So like right here where the part line is at H, and there's a little bit of an angle here. And then that's going to connect to the top little mark right there. Okay, and then the second part of the part line right here, it's going to go to H and a little bit into I. So H and just a little bit into I. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and darken these up because the paper's lifted and it's a little bit hard to see, but there you go. Okay. Now you can go up and down also. So for example, if I go in this direction, the first thing that I see is at A5. So I'm going to come all the way down here to A5, and I see what looks like a triangle, just like so. And when I go to A6, there's just this tiny little piece right here, and it goes to about the center of 6, and then it disappears, and then there's nothing else until we get to number 10. So when I come to number 10, I can see just the beginning of this. And then in 11, there's a little bit here. And I'm not going to worry too much about that because that's the hair. Okay. The neat thing about working with a grid is that you can start anywhere you want to. So let's say, for example, that I really want to focus in on the eyes. Well, if I come down to C6, here's C, here's 6, right here, tells me that this is the location of the eye. So when I look at this eye, the crease right here is actually touching the top and it's getting very close to that square. So that means that it's touching the top and it's getting close to the edge here. Okay. Then here is actually touching, then it comes up and over. So it touches about the halfway point and then it comes up and it gets pretty close to this right about here. Okay. For the bottom, I'm going to estimate how far is this lower crease here, and it's about here. And then the beginning of the bottom lid is right there. There's a second line here, that's the thickness of the eyelid, the lower eyelid here, and it disappears right about there, about the midway point. And then I can see the beginning of this circle, the outer circle right here. And we don't see the entire circle because part of the eyelids are covering. And then half of the pupil is here. Now I'm not going to spend too much time on the pupil because I want to wait till the entire circle is done before to make sure that it's perfectly centered. And then there's the catch light. Okay, so it doesn't matter where you start, really, if you follow your coordinates. So if I want to go ahead and work this part of the face, for example, I can do that before I put in the eyebrow. So that's at B5. So I'm going to go, B5 is right here, and it's actually starting here, comes down a little bit, then it turns into the square, continues on to number 6. As it goes into 6, it gets just a tiny bit wider. Right here, it gets a little bit wider. It continues to get a little bit wider as it goes into 7. So at 7 is right about the midway point. And then at number 8, that's when it changes direction and it starts getting thin again. So it's super easy to do. When it gets to number 9, there's a tiny little space right there, that little negative space right there. That will help you figure out like where it turned. So When you're doing this, you can use positive and negative space to figure everything out, right? Because you're estimating, you're not actually measuring every single little thing. So now I'm going to bring in this part of the hair here, and that's C4. C4, and it's above center, so it's right about there. And I'm going to go ahead and connect that to here. And then I'm going to connect this to there. Okay, so I'm just going to continue this process. I'm going to time lapse through this because you just repeat it. The advantage is that if you get lost, you can use your coordinates to find yourself again and fix. More often than not, it's a simple fix like going to the wrong square. Okay, so I'm just going to continue working on this and show you what it looks like when it's done. So what we have here is pretty much an enlarged version of this right here. Okay. So the grid really helped with the proportions and get everything in the right place. But before I move on, I'm just going to take a few minutes and use the actual photograph and make any adjustments that I need to make. Okay, because the grid is a tool, but it's definitely not the finished product. Once I'm satisfied with the actual drawing, then I'll be ready to move on to the next step. But for this video, this is as far as we're going to take it. So for example, I need to make some adjustments on the lip here because this is off center, and the eyes, they don't match, so I need to adjust the pupils and the irises to make sure that they're the same distance and gazing in the same direction. But those are minor things, and everything else is pretty much in the right spot. So I'm just going to go ahead and tweak this up, and then I will be ready to transfer it onto my watercolor paper. So here we have the final product ready to move on to the next stage. So what you can see here, I hope you can see this, I actually had to do some work on the eyes because they weren't lined up quite. This one was too straight, so I had to change the angles of the eyes. The placement was good, but the angle was wrong. I went ahead and fixed the lips. Originally I had the upper lip a little bit too thick, so here's where you really have to pay close attention to your reference material and make any final adjustments before moving on. I did a lot of work on the ear, and then I fine-tuned the neck and the chin. The chin wasn't pronounced enough. So pretty much this is ready to go. So now I can go ahead and darken up these lines, place a sheet of watercolor paper on top of it, turn on my light table, and transfer it. Remember that the grid is only a tool. Use it when you feel that you need to help you with a difficult subject. Okay? Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.